there, guys. Scrivo here, and welcome to the very first episode of our series about Crusade. The idea here is to kind of fill in the gaps because I've run over the course of 3 editions some form of narrative for my local club with mixed success. So there's lots of things I learned, and I thought it's kind of good to hand over and kind of pass on the knowledge. So we're going to run through this first episode. Is going to be about running a crusade. So this is obviously the most challenging part because obviously you're the person then leading the kind of thing and keeping it motivated. So I'm going to run through things like the location, how you kind of pick how to approach it, how to keep managing your group, because obviously the expectations there, everyone's like really keen, keeping them kind of on board. How to approach it so that it's not just tournament lists. So the kind of the order of battle, you kind of the roster, making sure people are just playing maybe some more unusual stuff, not encouraging and bullying them into not bringing good stuff, but at the same time, it not just being essentially a tournament practice game. And then the biggest challenge, how to keep that interest and kind of momentum going with the group. And I've kind of got some ideas there. And then finally, I'm going to kind of touch on something I've done. So I did a 3-part narrative event. I then did one in October that was the first of the next phase, and also helped run the LGT's narrative last year. So kind of run through some kind of core things I kind of learned from doing events. So if you wanted to do something kind of more of a kind of one and done sort of thing, it's a good way to do it perhaps. So right, let's get into it, guys. Right, so creating a location. So to me, this is without this, I think you don't really have a crusade, because yes, you can play the games, but you may as well just be saying, let's play pickup games at that point. So it's good to pick something like a backwater planet, make something your own. It doesn't need to be looking at a map of the Maledictum and going, let's be on that planet, unless you really want to. So say you want to do a whole campaign centered around being on Armageddon, great. Obviously, there's a lot of lore and narrative already centered around some of the bigger planets. It maybe makes it less useful. So what I've tended to do is I'm going to make a map. I'm going to do a subsector of an area. I'm going to make up some new stuff, because that's really, to me, what the jam was for doing it's the creative element of doing a crusade. It's like you're naming your characters, you're telling a story, and you're making it your own. And to help with that, there's things like the old missions. There was ways to make planets have rules. So like even just like Warzone rules. So the Vigilus Ablaze and Vigilus, the 2 books there, they had things like a snow planet rules for playing a map. There's plenty of things you can kind of chip into from the older books, so you don't have to rely on just the 10th edition Crusade rules. That said, there's plenty of online material where you can just kind of generate planets, map builders. They're all quite easy to get, quite often free or open source type of thing. So plenty of opportunity there. So you don't have to be a graphic designer or an artist to make something visual for it. All right. And then managing the group. So there is a couple of ways to approach this. The one I tried last time was an open approach, which is the second one on my list. This has a bit of a kind of mixed result, because depending on how engaged a player is, so you can have someone in the group that is very much, they love the idea of telling a story, but then you tell them that they need to keep their order of battle up to date. I've even read the rules about how to maintain their order of battle. It's a challenge. So to me, I think there's probably a happy medium between that and the hands-on approach. So you don't want to be babysitting people through their games and curating them entirely. Often it's very useful as well to set game limits. So for me, traditionally, I found people will start really strong. They'll be like, right, first 3 months, you'll find people will do a couple of games, maybe once a month, maybe as a minimum. I found was quite easily. As soon as it hits month 3, the seasons change. There's something new and exciting they want to try out. They're maybe practicing them for a tournament on the side, or they're playing another different game. Like it becomes really challenging. One positive of it is as well that if you're doing it as part of a larger group or a wargames club, you have the opportunity then to mingle people together that wouldn't normally interact, like social groups that tend to kind of keep to each other, kind of to themselves. Getting them to mingle is really cool. To help manage your group, one thing I'd recommend is, if you're even doing it just on the smallest scale possible, Goonhammer have got a really good web app called Administratum. This lets you record all your games, record your order of battle. They've got all the extra bits for playing Crusade using the Codex rules. Without that, you're going to be getting a bit of a headache. It's not the end of the world if you don't, but I found each game having at least a sheet of paper or a tablet open with what each unit has as buffs and debuffs, because that's the thing, you'll forget all your buffs, but you'll also forget when someone's, say, not able to have stratagems used on them because they've got some sort of disability on them. And that is the whole point, right? So without that, you may as well not be bothering. I'm putting in the description a score sheet template. I think you can always use Administratum instead because it's obviously a live update and they don't have to keep printing stuff out. But I have found a sheet to at least start with, because having something physically at the table is definitely helpful. The order of battle curation. So this is an interesting one for me. Like, the last time we played a Crusade in my local club, it was at the beginning of 10th. Space Marines and Necrons were the only ones with actual Crusade rules for the edition. Didn't really matter. The rules weren't the motivation for people to play it. It started off where certain players were a little bit more self-curating, which was, it's fine. But then there becomes this balance of you kind of look at it and go, okay, so if I'm bringing in an 1,000-point game 500 points of stuff I wouldn't normally bring, and the reason is because it's probably not that good either. Like rules wise, yes, it's important that the game isn't just about winning and losing in a Crusade, but when something is really just not good and it's frustrating, if your opponent has brought only a couple hundred points of stuff that's kind of a bit more kind of kooky and different, you're going to have a very strange sort of game. So what I found was there's a nice balance to it that you kind of have to find and encourage each other, maybe discuss your lists and your kind of what you're picking as you're going into it. Like turning up and someone goes, here's my list, and it is literally half of their tournament list. They've not understood what everyone else is maybe trying to do. So, but then if everyone's just doing that and bringing whatever the heck they want, and it happens to be quite competitive stuff, that's not a problem. But at the same time, as long as everyone is on that same page, that's the important thing, because we had this very much of a difference that there was a guy that brought all Wraiths in his Eldari, wasn't very good. And it was fine, but even the kind of mixed bits of like bringing things like a Brutalis Dreadnought that at the time was very expensive for what it could do, it was still quite miserable for him. And that's not cool. You don't want your games like that, especially when it's your club night and this is the force that they're almost lumbering themselves with for several months on end. The big thing I think a lot of people then, as a result, forget as well is that you can just use the Legends units. So if you've got stuff that aren't in your book anymore, Forge-old stuff that disappeared in this edition but still had a data sheet at the beginning in the index, use that. Give it its last hurrah. Why not? Like, my Squiggoth's going to come out next time I play a Crusade game, because why not? It's not in the bin yet. And then, of course, there's the opportunity that you can use the more lesser used detachments, because you're not built around the list, you're just units. You can each game pick a different detachment. Granted, there is the situation where then if you're giving people a warlord trait, they're locked into that detachment. So what I'd often done is we ruled it that if someone's got a warlord trait and they're not in that detachment, it just doesn't work. They don't have it. There you go, simple as, because if they're not in that detachment, that rule's not expressed for them. So there is a way of then giving some flexibility without it being silly. Like, you don't want to have someone go, right, I'm bringing all my Phobos stuff, but I played Ironstorm last round in my last game, but because I'm going to bring all Phobos, I want to bring it as a Vanguard. It makes sense. Like, for that army, they would be going, right tools for the right job and using the right synergies. And that makes sense to me. So it's an excuse to bring out the things you might not always want to bring if you're going to an event. Okay. And then keeping interest. So this is the thing I touched on earlier. So there is very much, I found 3 months in, people lose interest, they get busy with other things. So finding a way to make that work for you and your guys and your group is kind of key. So whether you go, right, we're going to do one game a month, we'll have a monthly games day where we play a couple of games together and we will run it for X amount of rounds. That can work really well. Obviously, you can just do it as free form. Some people just prefer playing it as their Friday night game, their games night, whatever. Is that if that works for you guys, great. But just discuss that ahead of time, because sometimes people are like really keen to start with, and then you just fizzle. Of course, I think the best thing you can do, especially if you're kind of a bit more sporadic with it, is booking in a day where you guys all meet up and you play a good couple of games. So I've done this, like my first trip to Warhammer World was part of a narrative linked group that we were playing our games. They all kind of had a little bit of a story to them. It wasn't a full Crusade, but then we took our armies that we'd been building and working towards up to Warhammer World and used some of the big thematic boards. Obviously not the most perfect for if you're trying to express a sort of match play environment, but at the same time, why not? It's an opportunity to use it. So there's things like those lovely city boards, or even using your own stuff. Like if you've got some more unusual things, maybe you've got some old Zone Mortalis boards and you just want to play something that's indoors. Why not? That's an excuse, right? And it's just about making it have that bit of a spark where you're not just on the same sort of mirrored board of ruins. Right, so here we go. Let's touch on the event format. So I did, in the Delphast subsector, I did an event that was called Warzone Faustus. There is, if you look at the top of the map here, there's a little pink blob. That used to be a planet called Faustus 4. By the end of the second narrative event, it had become a demon world, and then deciding on what would happen at the end of the third event, decided whether the demon prince that had been spawned when the planet became a demon world would tear a hole in real space. So there was a lot of a kind of challenges there. I tried some different formats where I did things like having people essentially be faction teams. So you had the Imperium guys all teaming up and their points all went into a pot to push the narrative forward. All of the Xenos Raiders, so this was all the kind of the more warlike kind of piratey guys, so like your Drakari, your Orcs, just kind of throwing them there. And then Civilization with the other Xenos, and that was more kind of your Elves and your Necrons. And it just made sense to kind of group them like that, and it gave a way of kind of, you might be having bad games yourself, but your games are contributing to the story. Because at the end of the day, we were running it as an event, so there was prizes, there was the chance to take home a trophy, but it was a trophy for being the best overall. So it was like, it didn't matter. Like if your faction, so if Imperium won overall, everyone got an award that was Imperium. And it was challenging because obviously I needed to have equal of each of the factions. So having 4 Xenos Raiders, so within those, that kind of pool of things, 4 from Chaos type of thing, it wasn't easy, but at the same time, it made it quite a rewarding thing. The next time I tried to do it, which was the one I did this year, which was the Dark Fires of Oberon Prime, it was an interesting approach where I went with just having narrative threads that kind of tied everyone together. I tried to keep it more free form. I had videos that I played between rounds. I very much had a goal in mind of what was going to happen at the event. And it was influenced by the fact that I had 2 Genius of the Cults players attending, and it was a 16-player event, and there was 2 GSC players. So I threaded it around the fact that they were fighting over this planet. Everyone else was kind of trying to stop them. And that was when the book had just dropped. People weren't really understanding what it did. So it was very much a, let's see what these guys can put together. And I threaded a kind of a narrative together, and I think it worked. It brought everything together. Best overall went to someone that wasn't overall the winner, and that was, I think it was Alex with his guard, I think it was in the end. And it was really kind of nice because it was like the winner then won some GSC. So it was very much themed around that. There were some cool prizes that were centered around it, but it was about the story. And like the reason why Warzone Faustus became a Slaanesh thing is because we had multiple players that had Slaanesh themed armies doing really well in the first event. It then kind of influenced things. So I then kind of pushed into that and went, how can I keep progressing this? And it was about me almost being the DM per se. So I think sometimes that can be really useful as well. Very much in the kind of the vein of Necromunda, where you have someone influence what the group are trying to do, give them goals. You're not just playing through missions. In the last one, the Oberon Prime, I used some of the Vigilus rules. So I had things like one of the planets was a snow planet, and the Apex Predator rules were there. One of my favorite things from the Vigilus book. And so it's just nice to kind of give people layers. So although they're bringing quite scary looking lists, they were all very well themed, but they were then thrown into this whole situation of the mission was not I'm just drawing secondary cards. There was things to get in the way. Yeah, so very much it was about the collaborative story, compete with the other alliances, and it was about stories. I think, to me, playing 3 to 5 games across a weekend, I might next time, if I was going to do a 2-dayer, I might do 2 games on the Saturday, 2 games on the Sunday. There is not the need for the 5th game. It maybe gives you a clear winner from a competitive standpoint, but from the narrative, it doesn't matter. And it just means that there's a bit more time between games if the people are there for a weekend, making the most of it. I think that's kind of cool. Yeah, and that to me is how you approach doing Crusade. Let me know in the chat, in the comments below, what you found the most exciting and engaging about running a Crusade. To me, it was the 9th edition. I had a Talon Master who just could not succeed. He just kept failing. He got a bit of damaged war gear in the end, so he ended up going on a redemption arc where he was going to get his sword reforged, and so he was trying to find somewhere to get this relic sword that he had busted up repaired, and now he's Legends, so he might get used again in Crusades, but challenging. But yeah, so what's next? I'm going to try to start to churn through the Codex Crusade rules. So each codex now that's had rules, they're a bit hit and miss at times. Some of them I look at and go, that's really cool, that adds layers. Sometimes I look at it like Space Marines and go, it's just another thing to remember. But I'm gonna go through them. I'm gonna pinpoint what can be utilized, what's really exciting, and what in previous books was really exciting that they maybe could have kind of tied back to. And then I'm going to kind of discuss about narrative events. So I'm probably going to do a video where I go to a narrative event, because I'm going to try to find some, because unfortunately for me, I found every time there's a narrative event in my local area, apart from the LGT's narrative events, because I might actually get to play at this year. It's generally been me running them, so I don't get to play, or if I do, I'm a ringer, so it's not the same. So I'm going to see if I can try to find some narrative events and get my narrative on, because I think the whole situation of events are only match play and they're only 2,000 points match play, GT pack stuff, it's short-sighted. So when I spent a bit of time at the Goonhammer Open last year helping cover Kill Team, I saw how the Heresy guys run it. And you get competitive events for Heresy, but I don't think the game is designed for that. And it means that then they express it in a different way. So they show all these different elements of a planet, extra custom rules. It's kind of fun stuff. And I went, this has unlocked something for me. And I'd like to explore that, but within the lens of 40k. So until next time, guys, don't forget, if you really like this episode, please hit the like button below. And if you want to be a YouTube member, it really helps support us to make more of this happen, helps buy books and stuff, because they're not cheap. And we do try to do this all kind of without a paywall. Obviously, if you're a YouTube member, you do get some of the videos early. We do special videos. Normally it's a weekly video that gets given to you guys exclusively, which is really kind of cool. And obviously, let me know in the comments. Take care, guys. Thank you.